like the politicos are wanting us to really restrain our water use, right? But they have an unlimited ability to like totally steal all our water, basically. You know, because they've done the payola thing to Sacramento, and they've paid off the local county, you know, representatives, and it's just like, you know, this whole thing has gotten pretty old, and you know,
this song and dance about
this story, you know, and it just like today I spoke out to a group of people that are very influential in the community and basically said, you know, we want to somehow figure out a way to manifest the money to buy out the Crystal Geysers facility and turn it into a communal food resource center, which means that from the farmer coming and bringing their goods to having restaurants there that people can come and eat at, to having cooking classes, you know, cheese making classes, you know, all the biodynamic things, to learning biodynamic gardening, to all the essential things for life to continue on planet Earth, you know, and to do it as a community. And the response was pretty dramatically huge, the positive response I got back, except for, of course, our local, you know, bobblehead, as Chris calls them, which is our I suppose it like representatives, you know, governmental representatives, city council. And basically, it was very interesting to see that the majority of the people that were there were totally in the favor of what I was saying, and not really in the favor of what the city council is doing about this issue that we're all very concerned with, because these corporations, this corporatocracy thinks that they have the right to steal and call it their resources, you know, something that is basically a natural resource that belongs to every single human being on the planet, water.
Freely, in the commonwealth of what we call the divine trust or the environmental trust. Right. It's free.
So what I was wanting to create is a container, Chris, where you and I could create a container and ask the water diva to come in, you know, Gaia, you know, which is the spirit or the soul of this earth, and different beings to come into our container, you know, our quantum container, and show us what we can do in order to appropriate this property and really turn it into a community, you know,
a commonwealth
in the truest sense. Interest, you know, as opposed to a private interest corporation, a fiction, you know, that's owned by some big wig up there that wants to control everything on the planet.
Which is what all corporations are in the end. They're corporate. They're right. They're
corporate thugs is what I like to call them.
Yeah.
No, the corporate
they're
thuggery.
They're a fictional entity. They're not living. It's an empty sort of concept. You know,
that's a layered service to serve themselves and protect themselves. You know, that's what a corporation was created for. You know, it was created for them to minimize their liability, which means minimizing their personal risk of whatever they cause harm to. You know, so what I want to do today is talk to Gaia and talk to the seaweed, also diva, and see what kind of things we could bring into our quantum field to existence, right, that will manifest this financial abundance to bring forth buying this Crystal Geysers facility, changing the laws here about how they can't come and extract the water, you know. While
they can't
the rest
just bulldog in here
right.
and bully them their way in and say, well, you have no choice. Lots of communities are strapped for cash, and they sort of hold that over their heads as a sort of Damocles and say, hey, you have 20-30% unemployment. Yeah, here we are. We're the answer to your prayers. For instance, Crystal Geyser promised 150 jobs, and as far as we know, and they're starting to pump the water, so they've got a crew there of between 5 and 10. Out of 150. So this is the mendacity and the broken promises that are just a continuous earmark of how these empty entities that work for their own bottom line operate. And they're doing nothing for the common good. They're not funneling back any of the profits they make into the communities that they suck off of. So I see them as a parasite, like a mosquito, just sucking out, and they put nothing back, and then they fly on to the next community,
the next town, and suck them dry.
Suck whatever dry they can, and especially in a severe drought like California is seeing, like we're seeing here,
and Oregon and Washington at this point.
But here in California, we've got severe, water restrictions that are being put on the citizens. Why aren't they being put on? So they're being put on citizens who pump out maybe at most, if you're running both sprinklers full blast,
100 gallons,
few hundred gallons a day, maybe 500, maybe at most 500 to 1,000 gallons a day, and you're talking about a company that's pumping out 350,000 gallons a day, and how they're given carte blanche and just the keys to the kingdom. And then we're getting yellow notices on our door that say you can only water Tuesdays, Thursdays, after midnight, between these certain hours, 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And it's an outrage, And so, these companies have not proven that they want to even work with the communities that they're going to come and suck off of. They don't come in and diplomatically say, well, we want to work with you. They just sort of backdoor deal.
Yeah, with the supposed, the bobbleheads that are supposed to here to protect our rights, and that's a bunch of BS, obviously.
Well, they're
here for their own personal interests.
They're midwifing this corporate interest, and then they're sort of being apologists and turning around to the citizens and being this go-between that doesn't do much of anything at all. They just act as a buffer or a sandbag between the community and these pillaging and raping corporations.
They come in and they give them their what I call their donations, which really boil down to what I call bribes. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all they are, is bribing them. Yeah. So what I want to do is we're looking at the problem now. Let's look at how we can, with Mother Nature, with the different divas, with the intelligence that we have, how to create a resolution for this, right? So how to create a container that we can put into the quantum field like we do our white magic stuff, so that we could start shifting the winds of change and shifting this so that not only our local community becomes conscious and aware of this, but globally, that we all become conscious and aware, and that there's a shift, that we're stewards of this earth, that we're not here just to rape and pillage her and then get on the next, starship, which there isn't one right now, really, and go to the next planet that's like the Earth and go rape and pillage that. Yeah. But, that's basically the thinking, is that, there's unlimited resources and we're just, we could just rape and pillage all we want, and if we destroy the Earth, so what,
This idea is so...
it's very archaic.
Latest, early 20th century, I see images of, loggers and prospectors pouring in and, them felling 200, 300 foot redwoods and, opportunists, robber barons,
There's a reason why they're called robber barons.
These
rob
corporate
things.
Opportunists. This idea is 100 years old. I mean, it's really dead.
And it's definitely, to me, this idea is very it's like a dying dinosaur, and
yep.
that needs to basically die and
die
move on.
Let it die its death. Quit kind of being apologists and scotch taping up the house of cards. Mm-hmm. Let it fall. Mm-hmm. Let the whole system fall, and let the community, let the people,
and each community, like each individual community, build it back up, because we have the ability, the resources, the intelligence. We have people that are...
It's just been repressed.
That are intelligent beings that have all this information of biodynamic gardening, biodynamic farming, and bring the ecology back. The truth is, and we've listened to Alex Collier, I talk to the Avatar Consciousness group, and they all talk about the same thing. They all talk about how we need to come back to a place where we are stewards of the land, and not, these takers. So that's one of the things that, we're being called to as a whole civilization to come into balance with.
To end corporate greed, again, going back to your idea of what do we want to create, what do we want to, not, and there's good destruction, and there's bad creation, there's miscreation, and there's good destruction, like destroying corporate greed, and destroying this corporatist hegemony that is pulling the belt tighter and tighter around the neck of the planet.
Right.
And it's cinching off the blood supply, it's killing the ecology, raping the ecology. So, I would say that's a biggie, and they've removed some blockages to where we're now getting the new science out, where they were suiciding and killing scientists and inventors. People who are continually trying to revive.
People that had new technologies that were a threat to them, and still are to some degree.
Well, the new Tesla coil technology, the Tesla battery stuff that they've been trying to suppress, desperately trying to suppress.
For 100 years.
Standard Oil and Rockefeller money has been just putting this stuff, aside and keeping it down. And now we've had some blockages removed. We have some inside sources. And we also have seen it where Sonic is a remote viewer psychic. I have some of those abilities too. We've looked into it. We've seen it. We've seen that it's true. We have the White Knight Brotherhood and the White Dragons in Asia, and they're working behind the scenes, and they're removing these blockages one by one, And so I think you folks out there listening can resonate with that and go, yeah, I feel a lifting of the energy. I feel there's a clearing there. It feels lighter. Well, that's what's happening is, and now if you look at any speech Barry is making, politicians look like screwball. It's not even comedy. It's pitiable, laughable slapstick comedy.
Kim's here on our show. She's listening.
Hi, Kim.
And she basically said, I'm here. I agree, sustainability is in everybody's mind. I will help with the quantum container also. So she's going to collaborate with us in terms of listening. So one of the things that I want to kind of change shifts. So we've talked about what the issues are. Now let's talk about how we can make the changes. So Kim, if you want to also add, what are the kind of things that you would like to put into the container as well, as you're here listening and kind of sharing with us in the chat. And anybody else that's listening to our show that you want to contribute to the container, because that's the whole idea about having a quantum container, is that there's a group of us that creates a mind, if you like, a mind group that comes together with our different ideas, and we share about how we can fill that container and send it out into the quantum field, and then have it reflected back to us on some form or another. So, one of the things that I'm going to ask for is, as I'm remote viewing, and I'm right now standing in the middle of this quantum container, which I kind of see as a big coliseum, And I'm actually going to call in the north, south, east, and west. So I'm opening up the container for all the divas to come in, the different divas, the different fairy kingdom or fae kingdom, or as I call the etheric kingdom, the angelic kingdom, and the higher intelligence, maybe the Arcturians would like to participate with us, Andromedans, different starseed families to come in.
Yeah, we invite you in.
And to be a part of our container and to assist us and give us ideas on how we can collaborate on manifesting, literally physically out picturing a sustainable environment for each of these communities to sustain themselves, and also to assist in the process of having the dismantleization of the corporations and their controlling bodies, for that to fall by the wayside so that we can go back into a more self-sustaining agrarian kind of environment. So